Kevin, you've survived 9 combat deployments. You survived Hell Week, Buds. You've survived Hollywood. You're continuing to survive that. Executive protection assignments. You raised 3 kids. Out of all of those, which one's the most dangerous?
Woo! Oh man, honestly, I don't know. Probably raising of the 3 kids, because it's a generational thing, and if it doesn't go well, you wind up raising 3 that aren't productive members of society, and then they keep contributing to the delinquency of our society. So I'd say probably raising of the kids.
I like that. I have 4 children, 2 boys and 2 girls, and I had hair until I had girls.
Yeah. I will say I'm one of 3 boys. I'm the youngest of 3, and my oldest brother has a daughter as well. My parents' first grandchild was a daughter. My mom was just over the moon. Well, so was my dad, but and then we had twin boys to start with, me and my wife, and I was like, "Oh, sweet. Like 2 kids, we're done." She was like, I don't know, I want a girl." I was like, "Man, we're going to wind up with triplets, and I'm going to be stuck driving a minivan for the rest of my life, or at least until the kids are old enough to get out of the house." But it worked out crazy. We had a girl, and it's been great. It's been great.
Yeah. The girls, I love my kids. The girls it's just different for boys. But
oh, for sure.
I'm Steve Murphy, DEA Special Agent retired, and now host of the Game of Crimes podcast. If you've seen the Netflix series Narcos, then you know my story. I now bring you stories of heroism and bravery from our law enforcement and military heroes, and occasionally from the criminals that they faced. Welcome to Game of Crimes. Our guest today is a 21-year veteran of the United States Navy. 15 of those years he spent in the SEAL teams, even acting as an instructor towards the end of his career. He retired as a chief petty officer, and that's a big deal. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Then after he left the military, he gets involved with Hollywood, and we're going to find out more about that. But he's been an actor, a stuntman, a weapons trainer, a military advisor, a producer, a director, a writer, an executive protection detail person. He probably gets coffee and donuts for everybody when they need them. I mean, he can do it all. He is now the co-host of the Liberty Risk podcast, along with his, I don't know if it's his future cellmates or what, but their names are Ryan Williams and Nick Betts. And guys, I love you, so don't come after me and kick my butt. He has founded his own company called K Squared Incorporated. You got to check out that website. It's one of the best websites I've seen. He continues to work in film and executive protection. We'll discuss more of that later in the show. And he's even pursuing his master's degree, and he's doing all this crap at the same time. I'm happy to get an episode out per week on the podcast here. But our guest this week is Kevin Kent. Kevin, brother, welcome to the Game of Crimes.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. It's great to be here. It's an honor to be here. And thank you for everything you've done as well. I'm looking at your Love Me wall in the back there, and pretty awesome. Unfortunately, my stuff's is like, it's like all, I need a better backdrop.
Well, I've seen you guys in the studio in Liberty Risk. That's pretty sweet.
Yeah. I got a bunch of camera carts and stuff in my man cave here. We've been working pretty good on the show, and I've literally I was in New York for a month and came back, and then we proceeded to shoot four episodes back to back to back to back, and it's been great to get that stuff off the ground. And I'm sure you know how that is when you're traveling. It's difficult to maintain that, keeping those episodes in the hopper. Even harder with 3 of us, because we're never in the same place at the same time, or very seldom. So.
Yeah. If you guys are wondering how we met, because you folks know I'm in Orlando, I'm an East Coast guy, and Kevin's out on the West Coast in California. We have a mutual friend named Jamie McBride. If you've been listening to the show for quite some time, or just any length of time, Jamie's been a guest on here twice. He was in episodes 162 in September of 24, and then last year on episode 211. I did a catch up with him on the Southern California Gang Conference, which I'm sporting their shirts today. you guys in law enforcement, if you're looking for a fantastic gang conference to go to, end of May, San Diego, every year, the best I've ever been to. Man, I'm just for transparency, I'm an honorary member of their board of directors, so I'm going to say good things about them. And they give me free T-shirts, so
Can't beat that.
But Kevin, I got to tell you, man, when I was looking you up, doing a little research on you and looked at Liberty Risk podcasts, I came across a statement that I thought was pretty interesting on how they described you. It says, a former Navy SEAL who brings tactical, combat, and dark humor banter to the show. Is that true?
Yeah, probably. I think I try to keep things light, at least humorous in most of the stuff that I do. I don't take myself very seriously. We were talking before the show, and some of the things, it's people are like, oh, great, I see your IMDb page. Like, that is awesome. You're an actor. And I was like, no, I'm not an actor. Like they throw me in front of the camera holding a gun and typically playing thug number 4 or whatever. But I by no means consider myself an actor or even take myself that serious. If anything, it's I'm playing a version of myself. There's not much acting involved there, but yeah.
We'll get into that a little bit later, probably on tomorrow's episode, but it looks to me like you're doing pretty damn good.
I try. And it's a lot of networking. And once we get into it, I'll plug the guy that mentored me in the industry and kind of got me my start.
Excellent. I saw one of your guests was Tyler Hoover, who was a deputy sheriff here in Central Florida, runs the Anti-Hero podcast. I love those guys up there.
Yeah. He was a very interesting guy. Got shot up during an interdiction, and he's got a pretty good story of overcoming a lot of that adversity and getting back on the mend and everything.
Absolutely. Good people up that way. So Tyler, shout out to you, brother. And you know what? He even gave me a free shirt. I should have worn his T-shirt today. I didn't think about that. I do appreciate the shirts. So let's get rolling here. Tell us a little bit about your background, where you grew up, your family dynamics. You mentioned you got a couple brothers, the schools you went to, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I was an Army brat, youngest of 3 boys. My older 2 brothers were about 3 years apart from one another. My dad was a 22-year Army vet, and I was born in Greece. My oldest brother was born in Germany. My other brother was born in Reno, Nevada, of all places. But yeah, we moved every couple of years, and when I was about 5 or so, my dad retired from the Army. We moved back from Germany to Northwest Tennessee, a little town called Paris. My grandparents lived there. It's kind of where my parents grew up, and it's about 2 hours west of Nashville, about 2 hours north of Memphis, like kind of right on the Kentucky border, almost where that little hump in Tennessee is, just slightly west of that. And didn't really have a crazy childhood. Very, parents married forever, and very, very good childhood in terms of played baseball, played football, played all these different sports. Dad was a scoutmaster. Me and my 2 older brothers are all Eagle Scouts. Wow. As are my 2 younger boys, or my 2 boys are Eagle Scouts, as well as an infinite amount of cousins and stuff like that. We were very heavy in the scouting world, and yeah, it was a great childhood. I didn't really excel or anything in terms of school, but yeah, growing up, made decent grades, all that kind of thing, and then that was really it. Towards my end of my senior year in high school, I had no clue what I wanted to do. I knew I didn't want to go to college, and yeah, I was back from like Christmas break, like your senior year, and all these people were like, "Hey man, what school did you get into?" And I'm like, "School?" Well, I didn't know I was supposed to be putting in for schools, but yeah, I basically was like, "Man, I better get my life together and figure out what I want to do." And knew I couldn't stay in that little town of Paris, There's literally no jobs there. And so kind of just, I don't know, didn't know really what to do. My oldest brother had been in the National Guard, and I was like, gosh, military is kind of in our background. And so I was like, well, I'll see about joining the Army, and went and talked to my dad and was like, hey, I'm thinking about joining the military. And my dad was an EOD guy in the Army, and was in Vietnam and a bunch of other stuff. And he basically talked me out of joining.
Really?
Out of joining the Army. He was like, well, he goes, you're going to go explosive ordnance disposal, which for the listeners, those are the dudes you saw in that movie, The Hurt Locker. Essentially, guys are disarming bombs, and they took a lot of heavy casualties during, Iraq and Afghanistan simply for the IEDs. I mean, those are the guys that are essentially going up and disarming all those bombs and stuff.
God bless them.
Yeah. I mean, those dudes a lot of them are missing fingers, toes, legs, whole thing. But the school is, my dad was like, hey, the school is ran by, it's a Navy school. He goes, if you're going to go EOD, he goes, you should join the Navy. And, growing up, being in the Boy Scouts and all that stuff, I was in the water all the time and swimming and doing all kinds of stuff. And so he was like, you'll get dive school out of the gig, and it's because it's the Navy, you get college credit. Like, I think at the time that was the only service that was really given college credits for stuff. This was in 1992. And so I went and talked to the Navy recruiter, and he essentially informs me, he's like, well, yeah, that's a great program, but when you come in the Navy, he goes, you can be in the pipeline, but you can't actually go to the school until you're an E5. So you're going to be in the service for a few years. And I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I'm thinking, well, I'll just go on for like 4 years, figure out what I want to do with my life. And when he was like, yeah, you can't go to school until you're an E5. I mean, I had really no context in terms of what that meant and how long. I knew it would probably be longer than 4 or 5 years for me trying to make rank and stuff like that. He goes, the recruiter's like, well, we have this other program you can go right into. They're called SEALs. And instead of disarming bombs, like, you just swim up to a ship and you leave your bomb and you swim away. And I was like, oh, that's cool. And he goes, yeah, you can go right into that program. There's no rank restrictions. And I had really no idea what I was getting myself into. And I was like, oh, yeah, I'll just do that.
No kidding? You'd never heard of the SEALs?
I mean, I had heard of them, but I didn't really do any research. I didn't really understand how difficult it was going to be in terms of EOD, because I knew EOD was going to be difficult as well. I didn't know that SEALs was still, like, at the time. I mean, you talk to people, it's like, oh, it's one of the most physically demanding jobs in the military. I was, I didn't really have that in my brain. And so I talked to a recruiter, and I kind of mulled it over, and I hadn't signed anything. I hadn't joined or anything. And sure enough, I'd been dating this girl in high school, and she kind of talked to me. It was like, oh, well, you should just try to go to school for a semester and see how you like it. And
is this your current wife?
No.
Okay.
She was like, well, see how that goes. And we didn't even stay together. It was like bad idea from the start. I literally went to like one semester to Murray State University, which is literally just over the border from where we live.
Kentucky.
Yeah. And semester of like whatever. I think I only took one class. It was English 101. And I was like, this sucks.
My daughter-in-law graduated from there. That's the reason I know where it is.
Oh, yeah. My mom graduated. I think my dad graduated from there too. It's the local college. Everybody kind of goes there. Yeah, it was like one of those things where I really didn't know what I wanted to do. And I was working odd jobs and doing stuff like that. And honestly, I think the thing that kind of finally got me off my ass is one of my best friends we were both working at this place called, it was a plant, Fisher Price Toys. It was an assembly line, and you working these giant injection molds that are the size of a room. They were huge, and you'd have these plastic parts would come off, and you're scraping all the plastic off the sides. And him and I both worked at this plant. And I just remember one evening or one day, he goes, I'm thinking about joining the Marines. And I was like, what do you want to do that for? And he goes, dude, those guys are badasses. And I was, and he was, yeah, they got great uniforms too. And I was like, yeah, their uniforms are pretty cool. But I was, hey, if you want to be a badass, go be a Navy SEAL. And we went and watched the Charlie Sheen movie, and we were both, yeah, it's like, dude, yeah, let's join the military. And so we went and joined together. And this was in like October of '92. We went to MEPS and all of that. And they had some program which this is the other thing too. I still think about it to this day, how little we knew and how we didn't know anything about negotiating for anything. And luckily the recruiter was somewhat knowledgeable. He didn't try and sell us a bunch of false, but he essentially was like, hey, basically you need one of these source ratings, you need certain things. And so when we went there, they had this store or this program called the Dive Farer program. And it essentially guaranteed you, as long as you passed all your wickets, all of your interviews and all your physical tests and everything, that it guaranteed you a path to go to BUDS, which is SEAL training, basic underwater demolition SEAL training. So when I was there, they were like, well, we only give one of you this program. And again, we didn't really know. We were like, oh, okay. And I had one less speeding ticket or something. And so they give me the billet. And for him, and, again, we had no idea what we were getting into. I mean, had we both been like, okay, well, if we both can't go, then we don't want it and we're not joining, and probably could have leveraged it that way. But again, we didn't know what the hell we were doing. And so my buddy, he essentially is like, well, what's the fastest way to get to BUDS? And they just totally screwed him. And they're like, oh, you go to seaman apprenticeship training. It's when you don't have a rating, you go to boot camp, and then you go to this 3-week school, and they give you a broad overarching idea of a lot of the ratings in the Navy. They're like, yeah, after that, you'll just get orders to BUDS, and you'll go to BUDS undesignated. And sure enough, he does all that. And in boot camp, he finds out that it was all BS. And they're like, no, man, after your 3 weeks of this school, you're going to go and sit on a ship somewhere. And after those orders, you're going to have an opportunity. Yeah, you can fill out a special request sheet and try to get orders. But most of the time, you're not going to get orders to BUDS until you're up to re-enlist. And he was like, man, I just got screwed.
Wow.
Yeah. So
let me ask you about your, as you're growing up, what was it like was your dad's career Army, did combat tours of Vietnam? Would you describe him as a disciplinarian? How was he on you guys?
Not really. I mean, my parents weren't overly strict, and my dad was 6'6", like 290. He was a big boy. They called him Big Ed. And I think more than anything, my mom was more the disciplinarian, because my dad, anytime, we would get spankings with a belt and stuff like that. But it was one of those things where I think my dad wouldn't go full out because he thought he was going to hurt us. But my mom's like 5'6", and man, she would whoop our ass. Like
she lights you up.
Belt, wiffle ball bat, Hot Wheels track. I mean, we got our asses whooped. I mean, yeah. Granted, we probably deserved it. I mean, we definitely had a healthy childhood of beating one another and doing stupid we shouldn't have been doing.
Let me ask you this question now. What is the dumbest thing you and your two brothers ever did together?
Man,
it's hard to narrow it down, isn't it?
It is. And it was weird too, because we were such a wide range. I didn't really hang out with my oldest brother that much because he's 6 years older than me. And it was one of those things where me and my other brother, we were 3 years apart. And I was now I'm bigger than both of them. But growing up, people would think that we were twins sometimes because he would grow and I would catch him. And then he would grow and I would catch him. And so we're always similar size and build and stuff. But it was one of those things where we'd get in arguments and fights, and he would whoop my ass. And then my oldest brother would whip his ass. And it was like, hey, quit picking on your little brother. And then stupid stuff like that. I remember walls getting holes in them from us fighting and just stuff like that. The parents would come home and like, what is this giant hole in the stairwell wall?
I don't know.
You're just like, I'm like, okay, here comes the belt. And I talk about that now, and people are like, my God, your parents were monsters. Oh my God, they beat you with belts. And I was like, yeah, I mean, that's how they were raised. I mean, even in high school, we got paddlings with wooden paddles in high school. So, I mean, it wasn't like some crazy thing. I don't know. I'm guessing they don't still do that in high schools.
I tell you what, man, 12 years of public school, 1 year, I think when I was in first grade, did I not get paddled. I got paddled as a senior.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember it was funny in high school. I remember there were 2 days in a row where I received 3 licks apiece. And I think 3 was like the max you could get. And the disciplinarian, the vice principal in charge of discipline, was this guy named Bill Hudson. And he played professional football. He played for the Buffalo Bills, and he actually played for the San Diego Chargers. But he went to high school with my dad, and they played football together in high school. And dude, he was a big boy, but he was the vice principal in charge of discipline, which was hilarious. And I mean, and the nicest guy. Like, you didn't want to cross him, but when you did something stupid, and he goes, "Hey, go see Mr. Hudson." And you go in there, and they're like, "All right, what'd you do?" "Well, I threw a spitball against the chalkboard." And they're like, "What? Now, why did you do that?" "I'm a dumbass."
Yeah.
"All right, put your hands on the desk." Wow.
Yep. Did he lift you off the floor?
Yeah, right on your ass. You're like, well, but at the same time, getting discipline like that, it's 3 licks, and yeah, you're gonna walk funny back to your class, but then it was over with. I don't ever remember sitting through after school detention or any of that. It was all just, oh, you're a dumbass. Here's your 3 licks. Now go back to class and see if you can learn something.
Well, they would give us a choice. And it was the vice principal. It was like the smallest man in school, but he could lift you off the floor with that paddle.
Yeah.
He said you can have 3 licks for 1 day. And I knew if I took a day from school, I'm going to get whipped when I get home.
Yeah.
So it's better to take it from him than it was from my dad.
Oh, well, normally I got my ass whooped when I got home too, because they talked. They're like, "Hey, did your son talk to you today?" My dad be like, "No, why?" "Oh, ask me how his butt feels." I'm like, dude.
Oh yeah, that's a standing rule. You get paddled at school, you're going to get paddled at home.
Yeah, exactly.
My dad was a Southern Baptist minister. I told you on our previous phone call that I grew up in Murfreesboro, there in Tennessee, and he was 6'4", and he was weighed almost 300 pounds at one point. When his belt wrapped around you.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, that was the worst. My grandparents used to keep this strap in their little drawer where the telephone and everything was, and we'd be over at my grandparents' house, and if we acted up over there with all the cousins and everything, and somebody would be like, "Hey, go get the strap." And we're like,
"Yep,
man."
Went too far again.
It would wrap, or like it would hit your ass and it would wrap around the front. You're like, man, this sucks.
But you know what? And there's a big difference between the way you and I grew up and the way kids grew up today. We knew what was going to happen to us. I knew I was going to get the belt, and you knew what's expected of you. And if you didn't live up to the expectations, you suffered the consequences. Heaven forbid anybody stand up and do the right thing and take responsibility and accept the consequences for their actions today.
Oh yeah, for sure. For sure. I still look back on some of those times where we're hanging out at the grandparents' house. And I mean, we had cousins and everything. Every Sunday we'd go and eat lunch over at the grandparents' house. And it's the farm. The farm is like my grandmother left it to me and my two brothers, but we still going back there. I remember just all of the shenanigans we got into and just the dumbest, being on electric fences and just, there was this dinner bell. It was outside the house, and my grandmother would ring this bell to get my granddad's attention when he was out plowing fields and stuff. Hey, come in and get lunch or whatever. And that had a big old wasp nest in it.
Ooh.
And it was one of those things where grandparents were like, hey, don't mess with the bell. Don't ring it. Don't do anything. If you do, you're going to get the strap. And I just remember at one point, a bunch of us were standing out around this bell, and my oldest brother rings it, and we all just scatter like roaches. And my oldest cousin was the only one that didn't run, because I didn't ring it. Why do I need to run? And for some reason, didn't get stung by a wasp. But my granddad came out there with the strap in hand and didn't ask any questions, just started whooping that ass. And to this day, my cousin's like, he still blames, like, well, dude, you should have ran. Like, what world are you living in where the bell rings and you just stand there? He's like, well, I wasn't guilty of anything. Like, guilty by
you learned.
Yeah.
Telling the kid don't do something, that's just like an invitation to go do it. So let's just see what happens.
Yeah.
So when you got over into teams now, what shocked you the most when you first got over there?
I don't know, honestly. The culture, I mean, I went to boot camp, then I had to go to A school, and actually I graduated A school. Buds was really backed up, and so I actually wound up going to the EOD school. Of all places, I went to the EOD school for 6 months just to maintain my physique, basically work out before going to Buds. And then when I checked into Buds, I was actually surprised, just not really by the culture, but by like how many people just would quit like right off the bat, or that showed up and were not ready to go. I mean, there was no internet or anything back then, or at least if there was, like, we didn't have access to it. But it was one of those things where you show up and they're like, hey, you're going to take the class up test within so many days of showing up. And then you're going to take the advanced test. And then that's how they dictate how many people are going to class up and all that stuff. But yeah, I was just surprised how many people showed up ill prepared or unprepared. And then, going through all of Buds, not to say it wasn't difficult. I mean, it was extremely difficult. Every day was they would tell you, hey, don't think about next week. Don't think about tomorrow. Just going through training. Just worry about getting to the end of the day. And in Hell Week, they're like, hey, worry about getting to the next meal. Don't think too far in advance, because you're going to psych yourself out and you're going to want to quit, because you're going to be like, man, I'm freezing cold right now and it's Tuesday. What's this going to feel like on Friday? And they're like, well, just don't think that far. But yeah, I was really surprised how many people showed up and just honestly had no clue. Oh, what am I getting myself into? And you go sit and freeze your ass off. And you kind of got to prepare yourself for that mindset of essentially you're like, man, I'm going to be cold, wet, and miserable for the next 6 months. And Jeez. It's one of those things. And you'd have guys that would run out to the surf or try and cheat it, wouldn't get wet. They would just try and get sandy. They're still kind of damp from the first, because you're constantly going and hitting the surf and coming back. And the instructors would be standing up there on the berm, and they would see the dudes who wouldn't hit the surf. And then you're like, dude, just hit the surf. You're going to be wet. But yeah. And then obviously getting to the SEAL teams, I was I would say I was surprised, but it was weird because you check into the SEAL teams after you graduated BUD/S, and you go to we would go to the Army Jump School at Fort Benning, and you check into the teams, and like right away it's like, oh man, this is awesome, and you don't you don't really know what you're getting into, but you hear all of the rumors and stuff. Wow, like, oh wow, I'm a Navy SEAL. I mean, even though we didn't get our trident until you have to go through some other wickets and everything, but you think about checking into a SEAL team, you're like, oh my God, this is awesome. And you're thinking like, you know, the CIA or something. You're thinking of the craziest stuff. Like, oh my God, we're gonna have the best gear and the best gym and the best everything. You check in and it's like some bombed out from World War II, and you're like, dude,
What
what
happened?
only until later in my career, they finally rebuilt a bunch of stuff, and even now, the whole SEAL campus, they moved it from where it was on the Strand further down to Imperial Beach, and now it's this massive campus of crazy buildings. So all the SEAL teams and training stuff is down there, and Group 1 is down there, and the way they kind of changed how everything was. Because I mean, when I showed up to SEAL Team 5, we were still in Quonset huts from World War II, and it was just crazy. I expected so much more, even though you didn't really know what to expect.
Yeah. You're in a position where you're going to have to earn it.
Yeah, and that was one of those things too. Because now I look at some of the guys that go through BUD/S now, and they show up and they're given. I mean, you get a lot of really cool gear, and you look cool, and you got all these crazy gadgets and helmets and body armor and all this stuff, and it kind of does give some of these guys like a big head, so to speak. And yeah, I definitely feel like showing up the way I did, to where I did feel like you kind of had to earn it a little bit more, and it was a little bit different mindset.
Do you see people that are going through the training, or even maybe after they've graduated and earned the trident, that they might become toxic within the platoon, a bad influence on others?
Yeah, that's kind of, I wouldn't say that's everywhere, but you definitely have guys that either complain a lot or stuff like that, and it does become kind of a cancer in some respect. And you definitely see different leadership styles as well, in terms of how your platoon chief or your platoon leading petty officer kind of handles that stuff, because it's kind of an ebb and a flow to that. I mean, when you show up in your first platoon, you're super hungry. You're like, oh man, this is what I came in for. This is what I'm trying to do. And then depending on the assignments and where you go and what you do during that deployment, it can have can change the way you kind of feel about stuff. And I mean, the crappiest assignments when I first came in the SEAL teams, they have spec ops platoons, and then they have ARG platoon, ARG, which is Amphibious Readiness Group. And this was pre 9/11. So I got to SEAL Team 5 in 1995, and you would have Alpha platoon through Hotel platoon, and those platoons were kind of designated. These guys are forming up, and they're going to deploy in a year, and they're going to go to Guam, and they're going to be a spec ops platoon. They're going to deploy to the unit in Guam, and then from there we would get JSETs, or joint combined exercises. And essentially, I think that's what JSET stands for. I don't know. You basically go on these exercises. Actually, it couldn't be joint combined. I don't know what the hell JSET stands for. Anyways, I'll look it up. But anyways, you would go to these countries. Essentially, you go to Thailand, and you would do foreign internal defense, and you would kind of teach the Thai SEALs, like, hey, we're going to do some over the beach training, and we'd do water stuff, or we'd do diving, or go to the range, or we'd do parachuting, stuff like that. And we would do that kind of all over Pacific Command. So, we went to like Malaysia, South Korea. SEAL Team 5 at the time was the Korea team. So we were like cold weather team. So we were always doing exercises in Korea. SEAL Team 1 was kind of like the Indochina, Pacific, jungle oriented team, and then SEAL Team 3 was the desert team, and they would typically deploy to later once they created the unit in Bahrain. SEAL Team 3 would typically deploy there, and you wind up doing a bunch of very different things depending on what your platoon was or what you're designated as. Because if you're a spec ops platoon, you would go to Guam and you would make per diem, and you would go hang out and drink and beat other services, and in the meantime you would deploy to Australia or any of these places, and you would work with some of their host nations and do stuff with them. But if you were unlucky enough to get an ARG, an amphibious readiness group, you would get on a ship in San Diego, and you're with the amphibs and you're with the Marines, and you're co-located on these ships, and you essentially you're at the beck and call of the Marine colonel, and we were like the bastard stepchildren, and you would literally ride that ship from San Diego all the way to the Middle East, and then you might do some stuff. The good thing about being on an ARG Alpha was you would ride the ship, but a lot of times anywhere there was a hot spot, they were the first ones there. So like any of the SEALs who got some trigger time, like in Somalia, they were a part of an ARG. And then you'd ride the ship all the way back. And it was just like, man, demoralizing. And
yeah.
And then there was what was called an ARG Bravo. And there was an amphibious readiness group based in Japan, in Sasebo, Japan, and all the way up and down Okinawa. And so we would deploy to Okinawa, that was kind of a decent deal, because we would stay in the Air Force barracks on Kadena Air Force Base. And then when the ship would go out, we would go and do stuff with the ship. But for the most part, we didn't do a whole lot on those. And we were away from the unit. So we were away from the flagpole, and we kind of do whatever you wanted to do. We were kind of at the leisure of your OIC. And he was like, let's go PT. And then the rest of the day is, do whatever you want to do. You weren't out doing movements or weren't doing a bunch of exercises and stuff.
Right.
But yeah, going back to your original question, you have guys who do ARG after ARG after ARG. And by your third one, you're very, I wouldn't say pissed off, but you don't have a lot of hope for, like, we're not doing anything. We're literally deploying with the Marines. For a while, when you're on a boat, SEAL goes from taking on sea, air, and land. It turns into sleep, eat, and lift, or sleep, eat, and lay around, because honestly, there's not much to do on a ship. And you're either, you work out and sleep and eat and repeat, and that's pretty much it. But yeah, it's easy to get kind of discouraged from being a good team guy and stuff like that. And you definitely have guys that all they would do is just piss and moan and bitch and complain, and having a good chief can alleviate some of that. And an OIC, if they're able to, first of all, get you off the ship or come up with things to get you employed, that's going to get you off the ship. Those are right at the alley of what those guys are supposed to be doing. Like a good OIC is always trying to get you employed into something. And I had this one platoon chief, and in one of my platoon, it was ARG Bravo, and we had this one guy. I think he was in his fourth platoon, and he had done a couple of ARGs, and he was kind of toxic, and was known as a guy who complained a lot. And so our platoon chief, he literally was like, hey, this guy, he's the bitching petty officer. Nobody gets to complain unless he complains first. And so kind of put it on this guy as like, dude, you bitch a lot, you complain a lot. And I think that turned him around a little bit to where if you start bitching, everybody's going to start bitching. And it definitely had a good effect on the platoon and as a whole. But it was pretty funny.
That's leadership. What's one of the funniest pranks that you guys ever pulled on your team?
It's weird because when we had these Quonset huts, for a while, your platoon was your platoon space was your platoon space. And so like looking at it from the vantage point of SEAL Team 5, if you're standing in the SEAL Team 5 compound and you're facing west, facing the ocean, you had 8 Quonset huts. Well, there were basically 4 Quonset huts, but there was a wall in the middle. And so you basically split into 8 little cubic or 8 little platoon spaces. And so at the far south end was Alpha Platoon, and at the far north end was Hotel Platoon. So you had Alpha Bravo Charlie Delta Echo Foxtrot Golf Hotel. And for the longest time, that's how it was, at least for a couple platoons that I did. And then for some reason, they were deploying a little bit differently. And the good thing with that too is like that was it was kind of like your identity or your home. And guys had lockers inside there. And so when you would go to do a trip, for example, we'd go to do desert warfare training. We go out in the desert, we come back, and all your stuff is still right there in that platoon space. And then the same thing too, when you deploy, same thing. You would just leave all your stuff in your locker, and you came back from a 6-month deployment, all your stuff is still there. Well, at some point they decided that they wanted a classroom. So they took Hotel Platoon and they turned the platoon space into a classroom. And so what that did was it pushed everybody's platoon space, and you had to rotate now. So when you deployed, you had to pack all of your stuff out of the platoon space, and you had to put it in like a Connex box or those shipping containers. And so another thing that did was each of the platoons, when we were moving out of our platoon space, we were like, oh, like in the office, there's like a drop ceiling. And so, I mean, packets of tuna, open packets of tuna. I mean, there was all kinds of, it was tossed up in that ceiling. And, I mean, it was bad. I mean, there was so many times where a platoon would come back from a trip somewhere, and you walk into the office like, oh my God, what is that smell? Like, Jesus Christ. Most of the stuff we did was relatively harmless in terms of stuff like that. I had a buddy of mine in my platoon. He's passed away now, but his name is Jeff Enderland. And for some reason, he had this bike that we'd ride. There was bicycles all over the command, but this one was his, and we'd ride it from the platoon space and go to airloft or whatever, you're like scooting around. Well, for some reason, one of the other platoons stole this bike, and it was funny too, because your name would be on it or something. Somebody with one line through your name and put somebody, like, hey, golf platoon. Or you're deployed and you come back and you see somebody's on your bike. You're like, hey, that's my bike. Oh, no, it ain't. This is mine. So it got to a point where somebody had stole his bike and he stole it back or something. And we came back from a trip and somebody had painted his bike pink.
Oh, that's not good.
I mean, tires, wheel, everything. And Indy was essentially sleeping at the command. He was essentially living in the platoon space. So he's like, oh, okay, you want to paint my bike? All right. So he literally snuck into one of the platoon spaces, the platoon that did it, and he painted the entire platoon space. I mean, lockers, refrigerator, floor, painted the entire thing pink. So, I mean, windows, and these guys, they came in and they were like, right away, they knew, oh man, all right.
Ticked off the wrong guy.
War's over. You won.
Wow.
But yeah, it was always really stupid like that, messing with one another, but it promoted a healthy camaraderie and a healthy jabs towards the other platoons and stuff.
Yep. Now, I read that you did 9 combat tours, mostly in Afghanistan and Iraq. What years was that?
So 2003. So I was in Iraq every year from 2003 to 2000. Yeah, 2011. That was 5 deployments there. And then I was in Afghanistan briefly during 2010. Nothing really to speak of in Afghanistan. I honestly don't even really mention it to most people because when I went out there, it was wintertime. And other than going to Camp Salerno and getting ordered, like there wasn't much that I did out there. But in in Iraq, I was there for the push. The very beginning of the war, we got there. I think the war started in like March or April. We were there essentially to relieve SEAL Team 3. So SEAL Team 3 did the big push into Baghdad. They did all the gas and oil platforms of the Al-Faw Peninsula, which is in the southern part of Iraq. So the main kickoff to the war was that first initial couple of weeks, and then we came and we relieved SEAL Team 3. So I was there essentially March, April to October of 03, and then back over there 04 to 05, and then back over there 06 to 07, 08, 09, and then 2010, 2011. And
you qualified for citizenship, didn't you?
Yeah. I mean, it was kind of crazy too, because I definitely saw how the local populace and just in general, how that country changed over that many years. When we first got there in 03, everybody was, oh yeah. I mean, they were happy to see us. And it was like watching that miniseries Band of Brothers, whenever they freed essentially like the Netherlands or Holland, and you see all the people waving flags and everybody's happy and stuff. And by the time we left there, they just wanted us gone. And it was kind of sad too, because we were only doing essentially what we were told, carrying out the mission, which evolved over so many years. But then to see that much time, effort, and blood, sweat, and tears from people being killed over there, and essentially the U.S. basically just kind of gave it back to the Iraqis. And then you see the rise of ISIS and essentially them taking back portions of the country. And that's a very disheartening to see, because you realize how much blood was spilt on that battlefield.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But I was lucky enough, even my first deployment, it was a spec ops platoon, and we deployed to Guam, and we were supposed to be working with the carrier battle group. The Independence carrier was in Japan, and we were supposed to be working with that carrier. And we go up to Japan to start working with that thing, and it's steaming out to sea. And we're like, what the hell? Did we miss the ship? And our OIC goes and starts talking to people, figures out what's going on. They're like, no, they got called to go to the Gulf. They're essentially going to Iraq, because there had been during that, this is in late 97, early 98, there had been this huge buildup of forces because Saddam wasn't letting inspectors in, and he was shooting at planes, and there was supposed to be a no-fly zone and threatening all this stuff. And so we were there. We did a bunch of real-world shipboardings and stuff like that, and we were the CSAR for when the U-2 flyover would go. We were sitting on the tarmac in all of our gear, essentially waiting for them to shoot down the U-2, and then we would have to go find the pilot. I mean, all those little things. I was in my third or fourth platoon when 9/11 happened. So we had the shooting school in Memphis, or just south of Memphis, like northern, it's like Olive Branch, Mississippi. And 9/11 happened, and we were like, that's crazy. And we weren't supposed to deploy. This is September. We weren't supposed to deploy until June or July of 2002. And then once the bubble went up, I think we deployed in October that year, the next month, or maybe November of 01. And we stood up the detachment in the southern part of the Philippine Islands, and we're doing active combat operations against, there's a group called the Abu Sayyaf group, or ASG, who were a militant group. They were essentially kidnapping people down the southern part and either ransoming them or essentially just beheading them. And so we were doing active combat operations against those people. And then the next year we're literally in Iraq. But yeah, looking back on all that now, I didn't realize I was living on borrowed time as much as I was, you know.
I can imagine. What's the closest call that I guess still gives you chills to this day?
I don't know. Honestly, there's so many. I remember in 2003, I was one of the lead vehicle drivers for our platoon, and this was even in the infancy of when all the IED improvised explosive devices were being utilized. But I remember our vehicle convoy. We had 4 thin skin Humvees, and that was the other thing too, being in the forefront of the very beginning of the Iraq War. We weren't getting a lot of IEDs, so therefore there wasn't a huge need for us to have up armored vehicles. But I just remember we were in this one convoy, and we're driving down. I remember what road it was. I know we just left Route Irish, and we're going north through, I think it was the Mansour district of Iraq, and there was a group of U.S. Marines on one side, and there was a group of militants on the other side of the road, and they were just shooting over the road. And we were driving down the road, and we just see tracer fire. And honestly, it's like, and we were in thin skin, non-armored vehicle, and we just blew right through that whole thing. And it was like, that was weird. You know, so that was definitely a pucker factor on that one. But as the war went on, and we did get armored vehicles and stuff like that, I don't know how many times we would either drive over something and it would blow up behind us.
Oh.
You're like, was that meant for us? Or we had jammers that were jamming the cell phone that would essentially trying to blow up vehicles. So it was one of those things where it was like, I don't know how many times we just came so close to getting our asses blown up. The firefights over there and the amount of close calls is crazy. I remember in 2006, we were in this area. We were in Habaniya, which is a little city. It's between, so Fallujah is to the east of us, and Ramadi is to the west of us. And it's right in the Sunni triangle of Iraq. This is all west of Baghdad, and this is the same time frame of Mikey Mansour had just been killed. Him and Mark Lee. Mark Lee was the first SEAL that had been killed in action in Iraq. A few weeks later, Mikey Mansour dies on a grenade. This is all SEAL Team 3. And we relieved Team 3 when we went down range. So 1 troop was in Ramadi, 2 troop was in Habaniya, and then I think there was some East Coast SEAL teams that were in Fallujah. But we were operating that whole area, and there's the Euphrates River runs through there. And we were on this rooftop north of the city, and we had 5 these operating posts or observation posts. So we had 5 OPs all around this area, and we were essentially looking for dudes planting IEDs, digging stuff in the roads and putting bombs and then covering them back up. And we got in this crazy tick. They call it troops in contact. We got this huge firefight, and literally the building we were in was just getting rocketed and just explosions. And at the time, you're kind of looking around, you're looking at everybody else in that rooftop, and you almost got to kind of make light of it. You know, you're like, this is crazy. Like the whole building is just exploding. It's insane, just rumbling. And we did they call a show of force. We got on the horn. We're calling our airstrike, and F-18 comes in, literally like rooftop, and just is. Feels like you can almost touch this thing, and it basically comes in and grazes the people who are shooting at us. So like, hey, essentially like, hey, this thing's going to start dropping bombs on your heads. And so that didn't really deter them at all, but we wound up getting in this crazy gunfight. And I shot like 900 rounds through this bell-fed machine gun. And
wow.
At the end, you could hear a pin drop. And it was like, well, that worked. But then the crazy thing, literally we went back out probably 2 months after that. And the exact same area, it was called Abu Bali was the area we were in. And one of the dudes actually got shot through his eye and like came out back here, one of our team guys. And he actually lived. He actually walked onto the helicopter and made a full recovery. He lost his eye. Just crazy stuff like that. During the time of we're shooting all these rounds and getting rocketed, we didn't take any casualties, which was insane. And then, only to have these guys go back up there a month or so later and you have a guy take a casualty is crazy.
Was there a time when a particular piece of equipment that you guys had failed at just the absolutely worst time?
I can't really think of anything like that. I think the biggest issues we had, we were constantly kind of adapting to what we had. We would get, for example, we'd go from these thin skin Humvees to now we're using like some up armored Humvees. And then even with that, they would put these jammers in these Humvees so that it was jamming these signals and put like a bubble around your vehicles to where like if you're driving down the road and somebody tries to call a cell phone to detonate a bomb, that cell phone essentially it could the signal was suspended or jammed. But with that, our radios wouldn't go through. So now we had relied on talking on communication. So anytime you're driving and then especially the up armored vehicles, because the more armor they pile on there, well, now it's more like sitting in a tuna can and you're trying to rely on your mirrors and you can't really see behind you. And it's more like sitting in a tank than driving an automobile down the road. And so you really rely on those vehicles behind you to be able to communicate with you. And so, it was really weird. It got to a point where you couldn't rely on comms, and we actually reverted back to our gunners in the vehicles because they're sitting up there out of the gun turret. They're doing hand and arm signals we learned early on our career patrolling, essentially like Vietnam tactics. And then slowly but surely, technology kind of caught up to us, and they built these radios, or they probably had them before, but they trickled down to where we were able to use them. And essentially these radios, you would key up the handset and you would talk through them, and they were synced up with the way that these jammers worked. And so the way that you're keying up and everything, your voice and everything, it was like burst transmission going in between the jammer, the cell. It was the weirdest thing. I think it was called like Singars or something like that.
Wow.
Which I'm sure stands for something. I wasn't a comm guy, so I didn't really dig too deep into that, but I just thought that was very interesting, the way that technology would catch up. And the longer we were in country, we went from thin skin Humvees to up armored Humvees, and then ultimately these giant RG-31s and RG-33s, which are essentially these massive troop carriers. They weighed like 30,000 pounds that they weighed, or so that was like, I don't know, whatever that equates to, 15 tons or something. But just driving these things down some of these Iraqi roads that were definitely not made for stuff that weighed that. I mean, dudes would drop a wheel through the asphalt and flip these things over, and it was insane. Some of the stuff we got away with, right, was crazy, but I can't really think of any kind of piece of gear that really failed at the most inopportune time. I'm sure there's a lot of stuff like that happened, because there's that old saying, I'd rather be lucky than good. Well, I definitely feel like luck was on our side most of the time, and out at nighttime, driving around on night vision goggles and stuff like that. And you're just like, inevitably something's going to happen.
I think everybody in the world would recognize you guys as studs and heroes for the sacrifices you were making, the dangers that you were facing. But was there, within your platoon, was there one person that you guys kind of looked at as a legend, and why, if so?
Honestly, I think every deployment you kind of wind up getting somebody that's kind of um, larger than life. I think that obviously coming in the SEAL teams, you look up to your older platoon mates when you're a new guy, and then at some point you're the guy that's being looked up to. And I mean, like in the '03 deployment, when we deployed to Iraq, we had this one guy, our platoon chief was this guy, Tom Crimmins. And of all people in the SEAL community, somebody that's the most pirate-like person, this dude was inked, like his whole body, from neck down. I don't think he had a single piece of flesh that wasn't covered, except maybe the palms of his hands and the bottoms of his feet, soles of his feet. But this guy was just one of those epic guys. He was a East Coast SEAL at SEAL Team 4 for a number of years and did some other stuff. I think he was at an experimental diving unit for a while, and then came to SEAL Team 5. And this was right before the Iraq war kicked off. And when you look at somebody like that, like, dude, this guy's a legend, not necessarily just because he's got a lot of tattoos and he looks like a pirate, but the guy was honestly very extremely smart. He knew warfare. One of the first operations that we did in '03, we flew up to this dam, and we were driving these little desert patrol vehicles. And actually, going back to your earlier question, these friggin' DPVs, they were built on 1980s technology. So we had a 3-seater and a 6-seater, and you would pull them into the back of these 50 CH-53 helicopters. And so we had 2 of those. We went up to take over this dam up in the northern part of Iraq. It was about 20 clicks from the Iranian border. We had a SEAL platoon. Well, no, we had 2 SEAL platoons, and then we had a platoon of Polish Grom. And so our platoon were in these vehicles. We landed. We essentially drove out in these DPVs, what they call them, desert patrol vehicles. And then the Polish Grom fast stroked down, and they took over all the outbuildings around this dam. And then the SEAL platoon, they fast stroked onto the dam itself, or the building that controls everything. So all that was getting cleared. This was six helicopters worth of equipment and people. And we had 2 AC-130 gunships overhead, and they were directing us where to go and all this stuff and making sure we weren't getting shot out of the sky, basically. But the funniest thing was the next day when the sun finally came up, we're driving these DPVs around the dam, and we find like 15 or 16 of these. They're twin 37 millimeter Bofors, anti-aircraft guns. They've got the barrels. Ooh. And these things were locked and loaded, ready to go. Anybody could have just sat in one of those chairs and just started shooting helicopters out of the sky. Well, apparently either they knew we were coming or something. They had evacuated the whole area and they left. So we didn't fire a single round. But going back to Tommy Crimmins, so when we cleared through this area and we set up, we held this area for like 5 days until Marines showed up and they took over for us. But every time during the day, we had workers that came in. They were running the dam. It was a hydroelectric dam, so to keep the whole area with power, they were still doing their jobs and everything. But we didn't know who was relaying any of our positions, because we'd built up sandbags we'd brought an extra 50 and brought extra tripods, all this extra stuff, to where we had a machine gun that we had certain emplacements to defend this area. Not to mention we had the vehicles that had the machine guns and stuff on them. But just relying on a guy like Tommy Crimmins, who he knew small unit tactics, and he was like, every single time, was like, hey, we're tearing down this place and we're putting it up again. And as a not new guy, I think I was in my 4th or 5th platoon at that point. Guys were like, why are we taking all this down and putting it back? Why are we changing positions every time? And which at the time, going back to what you were saying earlier, you get a guy who's got to complain and bitch and moan about something. We were obviously doing plenty of that, but it was obviously, if they would have ever gotten mortars or anything like that, and they knew exactly where our emplacements were. So every night we had to move our emplacement somewhere else or move it to a different spot, or and just fortifying, like constantly fortifying our position in case the cavalry showed up and we had to fight. Yeah, but I think some of the best guys I had were my platoon chiefs. One of another earlier platoon, I had a guy who he'd been one of the first or second classes of Green Team. So when he went to SEAL Team 6 in the early stages of it, and he stayed at Dev Group for a significant amount of time, and then he came to SEAL Team 5. And was just a super smart guy, highly respected, but knew everything about being a SEAL, and passed that knowledge down to us. And I think if there's any guys like that are definitely worth their weight in experience and just being an overall good team guy. Well, there was probably so many of those guys that I served with. I mean, it's hard to put your finger on any one of those guys.
Well, like I said, I think I'm joined by everybody that's listening to recognize you folks as heroes for what you went through. You did run away. You stood there and fought and did what you had to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
I tell you what, Kevin, we've been going for well over an hour now, man. It's and I apologize for the lighting here, ladies and gentlemen. One of our Florida storms blew in, and I'm trying to mute out the storm. It's beating the crap out of the windows right now. But
that is crazy.
Kevin's agreed to join us tomorrow for part 2, so hope you'll come back and hear the rest. We're going to get into his promotion up to Chief Petty Officer, some of the things he did, being an instructor at the Buds training, as well as his Hollywood career and things that are going on now. So, Kevin, thank you so much for joining us today, brother.
Yeah, man. Thank you. Appreciate it for having me on.
Thank you, man. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow. And everybody, look forward to seeing you tomorrow as well. In the meantime, stay safe out there. God bless.